Hey everyone, and welcome to Sasquatch Theory. In this episode, I interview William. He has had several Sasquatch encounters in the past, and a few encounters he believes it to be the same individual possibly following him around. A majority of his encounters happen when he has a dog around him, and it seems like the Sasquatch are extremely territorial when it comes to dogs being around. His family and friends were very aware of these creatures and warned him not to go back into the woods. William refers to them as the wild people, and I found this story to be extremely intriguing, and I think you guys will too. Alright guys, let's dive straight into these next encounters, and if you enjoy Sasquatch Theory, please hit the like and subscribe button. Hey William, welcome to Sasquatch Theory. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good, Miguel. How you doing?
Oh, not too bad. William, if you would, tell us a little bit about yourself and your Bigfoot encounters from the very beginning.
Okay, well, let me start with, as a child, the first Bigfoot encounter I had and where I learned about what was known where I grew up as the wild people. There were other names for them. This is in the foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia, Rappahannock County, to be precise. It's near towns like Front Royal, we'll say Front Royal, Warrenton. These are outside of the county, but they're nearby. Shenandoah National Park borders the county on the western side of the county. And the Rappahannock River is kind of like the northern border of the county. And my first encounter was as a child. We had actually moved away to Maryland, and I would come back to Virginia to the farm that I grew up on in Rappahannock County and visited a family there. I'll leave their names out, but they were close friends of my family. They were like a second family to me. And whenever I'd come back, I would go all over that farm. It was owned by a Catholic church at that time, but these people had an out parcel there, we'll say. And I wandered all over. There were 4 ponds on the farm. They were named after the family from the area and my siblings. I'd wander out to the river. It was actually just a creek at that point. This is the headwaters of the Rappahannock River. There are 2 forks that join at the very headwaters. There's one that comes down from Chester Gap and one that comes down from, I think it's called Ravens Den Rock. And we were on the Chester Gap Fork. So this isn't the spring that it comes out of ultimately, but it's at the bottom of the mountain at the headwaters. So it's a small creek there unless the water's high. And like I said, I would go all over that place at 7, 8 years old. This wasn't unusual. I'd usually take one of the dogs with me. We had left one of our dogs on that farm when we moved. Her name was Cleo, and she's in this story. And she was given by somebody else to us, and they had named her after Cleopatra or something like that. So that's why her name was Cleo. And, so even as a 7, 8-year-old kid, all day long wandering around several hundred acres was not unusual. I had never heard of wild people in the forest. I was always told to watch out for wild dogs because, sometimes people let their dogs go loose and they packed up. And that was a problem at times in Rappahannock back then. But they hadn't heard of wild people yet. So the day that I first saw my first wild person the first wild person I saw, it was either spring or fall, I don't remember, but the leaves were off the trees and the water was high in the Rappahannock at that point. And so by high, I mean it was probably, for me, up to my waist. I was a kid, but for an adult, it had been like knee-high or something like that. But it was rushing pretty good at that point. And I was down there with Cleo, and as I walked down toward the creek, I saw somebody on the opposite bank, and he was covered with light brown hair, human-looking, but oddly human-looking. And the first thing I thought was that he had that Wolfman disease that I had seen in Ripley's Believe It or Not, or in the Guinness Book or something like that, where somebody's covered with hair because of a genetic condition. And my dog started barking a lot. She really started carrying on, but, I thought, well, here's some odd guy out in the woods covered with hair with no clothes on, she's barking. He was not big, now I would look back and say he was a young one. He was no more than 6 feet tall, if that. He was probably the closest I got at that play, probably 20 yards, maybe even a little closer. And he was across the creek. And I thought, well, here's somebody who hangs out in the woods like I do and wanders around, and, well, he's got the Wolfman disease, so I guess he doesn't have to wear clothes. And I said to him, hey, who are you? Where are you from? And I thought he was maybe somebody's relative from out of town. And I know this is a bit of a sense-making stretch, but you're trying to make sense of this situation. Those were the things I had as reference points. And he said something back to me, and I couldn't understand the language at all. It was a very bizarre language. And as he walked, I noticed he had a very, I'll say, stalky kind of walk. He was deliberate but graceful, but not exactly the same kind of walk a human would have. Now, Grant, this is, several decades, well, not several decades ago, it was more than 3 decades ago, so 4 decades ago. So I'm not, my memory's pretty good on this incident, but, it's exactly how he walked and everything. It did stick in my mind since then that he had a peculiar walk, and his language was not something that I found intelligible. My sister spoke French, and my brother was learning Latin in school. And so I think my comment was, well, that's not French, is it? Well, my sister speaks French. And then he says something else, and I can't understand a word of it. And he starts coming down toward the creek. I said, well, that water is kind of high right there. You might want to cross the creek up or down a little bit. He doesn't seem too bothered by the water. And my dog is just carrying on. Cleo is just absolutely, barking. And I'm like, Cleo, shut up. Be nice. And she's just carrying on. And he comes down to the creek. And I said, well, look, I'm going to take her back to the big house, which we call it the main house on the farm, and come back. And then we can go, wander around the woods. I met a buddy to play with in the woods is the way I'm looking at it. So I turn Cleo around and kind of start moving her, like walking. And then I start running. Come on, Cleo, come on. And I look behind me, and he's crossed the creek, and he's coming up the little, I'll say trail, but it was actually like a tractor trail. You could get a bush hog down there. And then it was bush hog from time to time. At this time it wasn't, because it was fall or spring. Either, I don't remember, but there was no high grass or anything like that. And so I'm getting, like, oh, good Lord, I hope Cleo doesn't notice. And now she's only like 60 pounds. She's not going to do much, but it's more of just the nuisance factor, and I don't want her to bite him, And so I'm running, and I said, I'll be back, man. Just wait. I'll be back. And so I run up to where there was a dam on one of the ponds, and it's named after a sibling of mine. I'll use the name. It was Lake Margaret. And right on that dam, there was a ton of cattails. And so I start going around the pond, and he gets up on the dam and then gets down in the water right by the cattails and just starts splashing, kind of like the way a kid would splash, just, throwing his arms. Like scooping the water up and throwing it up in the air like the way little kids splash. And I said, man, I'll get the fishing poles and come back and we'll go fishing. I've met a buddy now. He's a little bit odd, but hey, he's out there in the woods with Wolfman disease. As far as I'm concerned, that's, just trying to avoid people or something. So as I'm getting up toward the main house and running with Cleo, I see the lady who was, like I said, she was like a very close friend of our family, and I stayed with her and her family, and she's walking down toward her house. And I said, I'll give her a name. I don't want to use her real name, but let's say, give me a name would be good. I'll call her
Sally.
Kim.
Sally,
Kim. Yeah, this doesn't even sound like her real name. I hope I don't screw up and say. But anyway, so I said, I met somebody back there in the woods. I said, who owns that property on the other side of the Rappahannock? And she said, I'm not sure, William. Why? And I said, well, I met a guy back there. You know that Wolfman disease that you see in Ripley's or in the Guinness book? I think in both, actually. I said, he's got that. He's covered with hair. So if somebody must know who he is, because somebody's got to know somebody's relative that's got this condition, you know. And she said, what? And I said, yeah, he's covered with hair. Like, you know, like almost like Cleo is, but it's light brown, and he speaks a funny language. It's a foreign language, but I don't know which language it is. And I said, but I need to go get the fishing poles. I told him I would go back and go fishing with him. He's down at Lake Margaret. And she said, William, what'd you see again? And I told her, I said, yeah, he's covered with hair, and Cleo was barking at him a lot. That's why I brought her up here. And she said, William, come back down to the house with me. I got to talk to you. And so I said, well, he might leave if I don't get back out there soon. Let me go out there and tell him that I got to come back and talk to you, and then I'll go back out and see him. You know, typical way the kids think, you know. I'm going to just run back and forth half a mile each way, right? And she said, no, William, just come back to the house now. I want to talk to you about something. And so I come down to the house and sit down, and she's in very serious kind of mood. And she said, I've never seen one of these things. But she said, we were always told as kids that there was something out in the woods called wild people. And we always told if we saw them to run and tell the adults and don't get anywhere near them, you know, because they were known to snatch kids up. Of course, you know, this was always the thing. If somebody want to scare you about going somewhere, oh, they'll snatch kids up. The gypsies will snatch everything, you know. So it's just like, oh, this again, right? And she said, no, William, they live like animals. They're covered with hair. Like I said, you know, she said she's never seen one. But she said, we've always been told that, you know, stay away from them. If you see them, just don't go nowhere near them and don't go back there. And this is why we were always kind of told not to hang around some of the creeks at night, because certain times of year, the wild people will come down through there. And she said they've been known to get in people's gardens and orchards and even kill people's dogs and things like this. And I said, well, have they ever taken anybody's kids away? And she only thought of one story of a guy whose nephew was supposedly snatched up by one, and the people didn't believe him because the uncle was a drunk, and they thought he did something to the kid and then just blamed it on wild people and this kind of thing. So, you know, it wasn't really definitive. But, you know, older people always would say that to kids, you know, don't go around these people or, you know, whatever, they'll kidnap you or something, you know, strangers or whatever, take you away, you know, kind of thing. So I'm not paying that too much mind. But I said, well, he wasn't, you know, he didn't look very dangerous. I mean, he was only about her husband's size, you know, which isn't even a really big guy. And she said, well, just because there's one there that you see doesn't mean there aren't others around. And you may see a little one, but there's others around. And I've been told that they get very big. And I was like, well, I mean, I think he's just somebody that's got the Wolfman disease. You know, I'm not really sure about this wild people thing, but it's very fascinating to me because I love the woods and I'd never heard of this. And I thought, wow, there are these people that live off in the woods and they just live wild like animals. This is the coolest thing I've ever heard. They must be interesting. You know, they must be pretty cool or something. So I'm not a bit deterred by it, but she's very serious, and she just said, please don't go back here, William, please don't. And I'd have done anything she asked me to do. I mean, I thought the world of her, and I was like, okay, Kim, you know, I won't go back there. And I'm kind of sad now because I thought I had a buddy to play with in the woods, and now I've been kind of told not to, and it's best for me, and I'm not believing any of that. I'm just like, yeah, no. You know, I think this is all a bunch of overstated stuff, but now I'm learning that there's such a thing as wild people in the woods, and it's absolutely fascinating to me. And after about, I don't know, an hour or so, maybe less. So, you know, after a little while, I say, you know, 30 minutes to an hour, her husband comes home, and I'm going to call him Ronald. That's not his real name. He had a nickname anyway that we all use, but she said, Ron, William seen one of them things in the woods like what you seen some years back up at the cabin where they used to live, which was on the same property, real close to it. And he just, he said, "Where you see that at?" And I said, "He was back here on the Rappahannock River. I was back there with Cleo." He said, "Don't go back there no more." I said, "Well, I go back there all the time. What do you mean I'm going to go hang out with him and go fishing?" He said, "No, you ain't going back there." He said, "Don't you go back there. Don't argue with me." And I mean, he's dead serious. And then I said, "Well, what's the big deal? I mean, if they live out there, I mean, people ought to know about them." And, I'm kind of getting them looking back and forth at each other like, oh, Lord, William's seen one of the wild people, and William is not easily dissuaded from things. Now, he's going to ask a million questions like, most kids would, and, he wants to know this and know that. And, I mean, they don't know all the answers I would have for them, but they just sort of said, we've always known about these wild people in the woods that live like animals, and they just look awful. And, I'll tell you what some other people would say later. They would say things like, "Oh, Lord, them things, oh, Lord, them raggedy-looking things, they just look awful. I'll never want to see them things." And now one lady that I kind of antagonized with, "I'm going to go move in with the wild people." And she said, "What are talking about?" And Kim said, "One of them hairy people-looking things like came around where some other family members lived maybe 10 years ago." And I mean, she just, "Oh, Lordy, please don't tell me you seen one of them things. Them things are the devil. I don't never want to see one of them things again." I mean, they were really serious. It sounds funny, but they were completely serious. It wasn't something that they were willing to joke about or whatever. Apparently there had been encounters, and they had seen them, or somebody had seen them and told, like one of them wild people been around or this or that. I think one was known to have killed somebody's dog, and these are things 10, 15 years ago. So I'm getting all these kinds of stories. I'm also hearing, that a lot of people don't like to talk about them. They think it'll bring them around, like the way people think if you talk about, I don't know, a lot of stuff, people are superstitious. They think if you talk about it, it'll bring it around, And so I'm not a bit dissuaded as a kid to go out in the woods, but I'm being asked not to, and then her husband's telling me not to, like, "Boy, you ain't going back there," So he grabs a rifle, and he's going to go back here on the tractor. And I'm like, "Oh, no, you're not going to go back here and shoot him. Like, don't shoot him, What are you doing? He didn't do anything. He didn't hurt anything." And he just said, "I'm just going back there. I ain't going to shoot nothing if I don't have to." And so he goes back there, doesn't see anything, comes back after a while. It probably took him an hour or so. And I said, "Well, what have you seen? You've seen one." And he said that, yeah, he saw one up by the cabin that they used to live in maybe 10 or 15 years prior to that, and said it was, he was about 7.5 feet tall. He would always say "brother" before he talked. I said, "Well, how big was he? Because this one wasn't any bigger than you." And he said, "Brother, 7.5 feet tall." He said, "I didn't know what to do. I went in the cabin, and, after he had said, I think he said he smelled something, and then he went around the side and saw this thing in the wood line and just was like, oh my God," and goes in, and after maybe 15 or 20 minutes had enough nerve to come out with a gun, and it was gone. But that was my first learning about wild people, which absolutely fascinated me. And I had kind of resolved in my mind, I said, I'm going to meet these wild people. I'm going to meet them. I'm going to find out something about them. Like, if they're living off in the woods, they have to be eating something. They have to be living somewhere. Maybe they do just live like animals. They don't have houses. That's what they told us, that they don't build houses. They just live off in the woods like animals and look awful. And, I mean, I'm thinking, well, there's got to be, like, somebody's got to know them. Somebody's got to get to know them. This is just too interesting. It's not just like bears or, some animal like that you kind of already have a sense about. I mean, this is really fascinating. So my dad, I think the next day, came to pick me up and take me to see a friend of his. And and just hang out there for the day by their pond. And I told him about it. I don't remember if the lady or her husband told him anything, probably so, but he wanted to know what I was, seeing. And he said, I've never heard of these wild people. Now, my dad had moved out to Rappahannock from Maryland. He was from Rockville, Maryland. So he had lived in Rappahannock for a while, but he wasn't like from there, and he may have heard stories of some things, but probably thought it was just all superstition or just drunk people telling stories, and that kind of thing. And he didn't really believe me, but he kind of didn't disbelieve me. That he's something, you saw someone, but I'm not believing what you're saying or what the family was telling him. And he's not believing that at all. And he said, what do you mean he was hairy? He was hairy like your Uncle Michael? And I'm like, no, he was hairy like Cleo. Like he was covered with hair like an animal. Like the people with the Wolfman disease. And I thought it was just somebody with Wolfman disease. I didn't know anything about these wild people. And, it's back and forth. My dad's a lawyer, so I'm on the stand getting grilled, getting cross-examined, even as a kid. And I'm just kind of getting sick of the whole thing, going, all right, forget it. I'm not going to tell you anymore. I'm just not going to tell you anything. And, why want you to tell me this? Why don't you tell me that? Well, you don't believe anything I'm telling you, so I'm not going to tell you anything else. Eventually, that'd be my attitude with older people who didn't know anything about them. I kind of got this attitude if you know about the wild people, then I'll talk to you about them. If you don't, I'm not going to tell you anything. But he took me over to see a friend of his. I will use his friend's name. His friend's name was Billy Cameron. And he was kind of a big, rugged, mountain dude, hunter, all that, Vietnam vet, pretty badass dude. And he told Billy C about this. Billy Cameron believed it. He knew these things were real. And he all of a sudden gets this brilliant idea that he can hunt one. And so he takes me and shows me a bunch of, he said, what you saw is the most elusive animal in the woods. And, I've never been able to track one, but I've known one that, like he's really trying to hunt one. And now he wants to use me for bait, which my dad, believed the story or not, was not about to let happen. He was like, well, you're not going to use my son for bait. I don't give a damn whether I believe any of this shit or not. And so I got pissed at Billy C for this because I'm like, all right, already one person grabbed a gun to go after him. Now you telling me you want to kill one and put him on the wall like it's a deer, and I lost it. I about cussed him out as an 8-year-old. I really let him have it. And I knew how to use the language, and I used it. And my dad was like, don't you talk to Billy C like that. And I'm like, I don't give a fuck. He's going to go try and kill my friend. He's my friend. You leave him the F alone, and that kind of thing. So I think Billy C got kind of a kick out of that. But, he believed me. And this really kind of got my dad started. He's like, good Lord, everybody knows about this but me. And Billy Cameron told him, said, well, the black people in the area who I was staying with, they know them as wild people. I call them mountain devils or wood boogers, and I didn't really like the term wood booger. It sounded kind of, mean or whatever. And mountain devil kind of sound cool, but at the same time, it's a little bit, wild people sounded better to me. And he said, yeah, they all know about them. And he said, but they are around. It's just that one hasn't been around for like 10 or 15 years in this area. And so he's surprised that I saw a young one because he knows if there's a young one around, well, they've got parents. And so this is who he wants to find. And he also had the sense that if they like you, that they'll find you. They'll seek you out. In other words, this is kind of like people now talk about being tagged or whatever, but he had a sense of that back then. And this is probably in 83, I would say, around that time. So, I wasn't about to let anybody hunt my friend out there, and I didn't care about all of their, horror stories or anything like that, which honestly I've, heard about killing dogs and stuff. I never heard of them do anything to people. I did hear a story that somebody else we knew there had followed one time years ago and came back but didn't want to talk about it and never tried to follow one again. So whatever happened to them, they came back shook, and they weren't interested in trying to find one or hear about one or anything. You know, it was not something that was a mystery to a lot of people in that area anyway.
So at this point, you've seen a Sasquatch, but you think it's a hairy person, and it's defined as hypertrichosis, also known as werewolf syndrome, and it's a condition characterized by excessive hair growth anywhere on a person's body, which is interesting.
Correct. That's still, at this point, I accept that there's such a thing as wild people. Like, I don't anymore think that he's got the hypertrichosis or whatever. I've kind of said, okay, there are such a thing as wild people now. Everyone knows about them, it seems. They don't want to talk about them. I bring them up to older people, and they get very upset. As the kind of kid I was, I learned I could antagonize some of the older people whenever they would tell me to come back early. I'd go fishing, on the ponds, and I'd come back on other days. This was, by the way, the only trip back where I saw one. I came back to that farm lots of times after that before I moved from Maryland, and, walked all around the same places and never saw anything. But I would, sometimes older people would tell me something like, yeah, boy, you better be back here before dark. And I'd be like, well, I'm going to go move in with the wild people. And they, boy, don't you talk like that. They'll take you away. We'll never see you again. Don't you talk about them. I mean, you really kind of got scolded. I mean, I about got my butt whooped more than once by some older people for kind of antagonizing them with I'm going to go move in with the wild people. I think the gentleman I'll call Ron, he was funny, though. I said that one time to him, and he said, well, they ain't got no houses. I guess you can move out with them, but you ain't going to move in with them. And so I think that was kind of the back and forth that there was. So I accepted there were such a thing now, and they were, hairy, people-looking things. They were described as hairy, people-looking things off in the woods, literally. I think when I told the lady who said they were the devil, that was what her, her friend had said to her, the lady who I stayed with was, and I know there's a lot of people in this, and I'm jumping around, but, what William talking about, them hairy people-looking things off in the woods, he done seen one. And I mean, nobody wanted to hear that they were around again. It was a periodic thing, I guess, and nobody wanted to hear about it. Now, coming back to the Appalachian Mountains later and talking to people over the years, I'd find that story about, kids being told to run tell to older people and stuff like that existed in lots of places. I ended up, talking to a lady who said a bunch of them stole her apples, interestingly, near where, not too far from where I live now. And I asked if she'd ever heard that happen. And she said, yeah, where she grew up in Dickinson County, Virginia, which is way down in southwestern Virginia near Kentucky. She said that they were around one time and they wouldn't even let the kids go to the bus stop without an adult with a gun, with a rifle. They got into people's gardens. She said they ransacked her garden and left a squash on the porch one time, which I had to laugh at. Like, thanks for all the garden vegetables. Here's a squash for your troubles, kind of thing.
Yeah, that is interesting. William, if you would, could you get into your next encounter when you actually see this thing again? Or I don't know if it's a different one, but if you would.
No, I never saw this one again that I could tell.
Okay.
I moved away from Maryland. I moved to Minnesota for a few years and then moved back to Virginia, Shenandoah County. And out there kind of where Shenandoah and Frederick meet and close to the state line of West Virginia, the Cedar Creek area. South of Winchester, we'll say, but more on the west side, Little North Mountain. And that one was, I was out walking my dog, and he was in an area where it wasn't our property, it was somebody else's. There were a lot of four-wheeler trails around there. I'd also ride my four-wheeler around there. And that one was not a big one either. It was maybe, I mean, I'm not a big guy. I'm only like 5'9", so I'm not a tall guy anyway. But that one couldn't have been anything more than 5'11", and that one had black hair and white skin. But that one was in an area probably probably about a mile from my house. And it was people that lived kind of in the area, but there was also a big old hollow that I think it stayed in for a good while. Because years later, I would have him like as late as '98. I had a friend of mine who was in there hunting tell me, he said something's following him, and I said, yeah, so what? He said, the dude that was on 2 legs, and I said, oh God, I haven't seen that one but one time, and I said that's interesting to know he's still around. And as much as I walk around there, I've never seen him since. That one I actually tried to get. I got pretty close to, and that one got scared by my dog because I tied my dog up, a big old Mastiff at this point. Now I don't have little Cleo anymore. Now I've got a big old Mastiff, and he's probably 220 pounds at about 37 inches at the shoulder. And when I saw the wild person, when I was walking the dog, I said, I'm going to tie him up and go down there and try and meet him. I'm going to tie the dog up and go down there and try and talk to this, this guy, whatever. And so I tied my dog up to a tree, and I think he's pretty good and secure. I walked him out of view, but he kind of already seen this thing and knew what was going on. And, he's a protector. He's a sweetheart. He's a good boy, and he's a big guy. I mean, he's a 220-pound Mastiff. And so I called at him, and this wild man's walking away. And I said, no, man, come back. I said, who are you? Where are you? And then I'm speaking English. I don't expect him to understand English, but I'm going to talk to him in English and hope he gets kind of, an idea at least of my vibe or whatever. And he turned around, and I just motioned to him like, no, come here. Like, I don't want you to run off. I want to know what you guys are. Like, this is just too weird. You guys live off in the woods. And, as a kid, I've seen some I like you, but I've seen wild people before. And now this is the next time I see one is maybe not quite 10 years later, but 8 or 9 years later in a whole different area. This one looks different.
Before you get into that one, can you describe what the Sasquatch looked like that was walking away?
Yeah, no hair on his face. He had black hair. It wasn't very long, probably about, 3 to 4 inches long, heavy, but not overly furry. You wouldn't see skin through his hair, I guess, on his arms or anything like that. He had a very archaic looking face. The only thing I could kind of relate their face to is something like the Homo erectus recreations in the Natural History Museum, something like that. And kind of, you look at the Dennis Oven recreations and them, but yet this guy's covered with hair. And he has a very, when I say archaic, I mean kind of robust, archaic, wide nose, wide mouth, but it's not a prognathous jaw. It's not like a monkey's jaw or something like that. No more prognathous than some people can be. His ears were visible. They were not hairy, but they were, also kind of covered up. But they, like I said, the edges of them were visible. And, he had that same kind of walk though, where they kind of he had the same walk as the other one had, where they keep their knees kind of bent. And it's a very interesting gait. It's in a way, it's very graceful. And it's also very, I hate to say animalistic because, I mean, what does that mean? But that's, the term that comes to mind. And I don't really remember his eye color at all. I don't. It wasn't, there was no eye shine or anything like that. But very human looking eyes. Extremely human looking eyes. Bigger though. But this one again was not a big giant one. This was a 5'11" or whatever. And I to this point don't even think that these are the same thing as Bigfoot or Sasquatch, because all of the Bigfoot and Sasquatch I've heard is that they're huge. And I'm thinking wild people are like an eastern smaller cousin. And people are saying, no, the ones in the east get big too, but I haven't seen one like that. So it's not really, I haven't really kind of understood that, Like I hear people saying, oh, they get 7-8 feet tall. I think people just exaggerating. Oh, no, they don't. They're like, maybe they get up to 6'5" or 6'6", and because they're hairy and they're, wild, they look like they're bigger than they really are. Later I would find, no, they really do get that big. But this one was not. And he was not interested in having any encounter with me. He was kind of walking away. He wasn't running away. But I did coax him to stop. I did get him to stop, and I walked down towards him. And I said when I got about 15 feet from him, he got very, say, agitated. You got the vibe from him that I don't really want you to get any closer. And I'm kind of still walking a little bit closer because, he's not hella big and scary. And I'm thinking, well, what if he attacks me? I guess I'll have to fight him off. But, I'll take my chances. And it's just too... I gotta know who these guys are and what they're doing in the woods and how they live in the woods like they do, because they're not. I don't run across their houses or huts or caves or anything like that. Later, I will find out that a lot of times they do go in caves, but I'm thinking, what do they do? Just lie on the ground in the winter and sleep in the snow? I never see, evidence of that. But I want to know more about him, so that's why I'm trying to get closer to him. And I don't know how I'm going to explain this or find this out, but you have to make that first kind of encounter. So he did stop, and I got a little closer, and he said something, and that kind of stuck me. I kind of got a little scared when he talked because he talked very aggressively and very loud, and it was a very a strange kind of language. Later, when I would hear the Sierra sounds, I would say, yeah, that's a similar vocalization. I didn't hear quite the same kind of carrying on, and it sounded to me more like they were actually speaking some sort of a language. It wasn't just a bunch of hoops and all that kind of stuff. Well, they do that too, but they have like what we would recognize as words, and his language was it was viscerally kind of disturbing. In a way, I don't know how to put that. And I did kind of get a little bit scared at that point. I was like, ooh, you getting awful bold here, and he's not looking like he's like, oh, hi, how you doing? I can't wait to meet you. So I'm pushing my luck, but at the same time, it's broad daylight. I'm in an area I'm familiar with, I'm kind of weighing these things back and forth. And then he gets this look in his face. And I'm going, what are you looking at? And I look behind me, and here comes my big old Mastiff, running right towards us. And I'm like, oh, my God. So, I run up and go, so I look it back at my phone. I'm sorry, man. I'll come back, And he said something else, and he ran out. And I went and grabbed my dog and was like, why'd you do that? I was almost, right there talking to him. You just, screwed this whole thing up. And my dog was just being a protector, and I didn't get mad at him. I was just like, that was great timing. I wish you hadn't have done that. But he had chewed his leash. That's how he got loose. And so that was the last time I would ever see that one in that area of Cedar Creek where I lived. Although, like I said, I did have a buddy tell me that he saw him around, and there was a real deep hollow I think he stood back into, because whenever I would walk back in there, I would always kind of get the sense that somebody was back there that didn't really want me around, and maybe they would go up on the hill to try to stay out of sight or whatever. And now there were houses up on the ridge above that hollow, but I don't know how much them people came down in there, because it was all like fallen hemlock trees and everything. No rhododendrons in there. Not in that part of the county, there just weren't. But it was like an old hemlock grove in a real, not swampy area, but it was damp. There was a little creek that ran through it. Not a big creek, but it was real primeval looking. It was a cool little environment. I like going back in there. And I never saw this wild person again there. So the next time I would see one would be in Shenandoah National Park.
Okay. Yeah, if you would, go into that next encounter, and you're doing a great job, man.
Okay, well, that one was with the same dog, and that was up on a hollow called Corbin Hollow. It's a side hollow to Nicholson Hollow. And you park at the Nethers parking area. Now, there's a cabin there called I think it's Nicholson Cabin or Corbin Cabin. I can't remember. The Potomac Appalachian Trail Club runs. Is on there. So this area is pretty heavily visited. And it's not far from Old Rag Mountain, which is incredible. I mean, just, any weekend in the summer or the spring or the fall, for that matter, it's just a steady stream of people doing the circuit hike there with the rock scramble and the saddle trail. And So this area is pretty heavily visited. I don't know, as many people don't go up in that hollow, but it's not, a really remote section of the park. But at the same time, it is still, the national park. And I don't remember what time of year. I think it was like September, if I remember correct. And that one, with the same dog, I'm just decided to take a circuit hike, which was up Corbin Hollow and then over, I think it's Corbin Mountain, or maybe it's Thoroughfare Mountain. But you go up to where I almost have to look at a map now. It's been so many years. But you would just go up to the top of the hollow there and make a left and then come back to Ridge. I think it was Corbin Mountain. It was the mountain south of the hollow. So if you went up the hollow from, let's say the hollow was north going kind of east-west, and if you went up the ridge or up the hill, that was to your left or to your south, that would be the mountain right there. I think it's Corbin Mountain. And then walking up that trail, something was up in the woods, running from tree to tree, and it was a good ways, several hundred, 200 yards up, and I couldn't really see. And I kind of, already at this point, I know what wild people are. It's not a mystery to me. I'm thinking, okay, this is just part of the woods, and some days you run into these things. It wasn't like a once in a lifetime thing to me at that, And he was throwing rocks down. My dog didn't want to go any further. Now, this is the same dog that ran after the one that chewed through his leash, and it run toward the one. Mm-hmm. And I was like, no, we're taking this hike. We're going on a hike. We're not going to turn around and go home because there's wild people in the park. And, he had to do this thing where I had to walk back down the trail with him and then turn him back around and walk up the trail with him because he didn't want to go. And that guy, he called him Thing, but, the wild guy up in the woods, it threw a rock and it just about hit my dog. It wasn't a big rock. It was a small one. It was a pebble. It wasn't like he was trying to hurt him. But it upset me, so I yelled up to him. I was like, why are you throwing rocks at my dog? He didn't do anything to you. So I just do a lot of miming with my hands and kind of like, why are you doing that? Don't do that. I see you up there, but don't do that. So I keep on walking, and my dog is still doing this thing where he don't want to go. So he stops and just stops and won't let me move him. So then I turn around and walk back down, and then after about 10 feet or so, I turn him around and walk him back, and he's just like, oh, shit, I guess I'm not going to win this one. And so we go on up Corbin Hollow, which is it branches off to the left if you're going up Nicholson Hollow. And toward the top of the trail there, or toward the top of the hollow, I see this guy standing on the side of the trail, on the right side of it, right up at the trailhead. And, I told my dog, I said, we're going to meet a wild person today. There he is. And he wasn't moving, and I'm just walking up there, and I'm, okay, we're going to meet one. And we get up to the top of the trailhead, and this is another one that's not a big one. He's about the same size as the other ones, maybe 6 feet tall, not really bulky or anything, muscular. This one, the hair isn't as thick on him. You can see the skin through his hair kind of, but he's covered with hair, and it's like I say, like a light brown. He's got a more or less a whitish skin, and kind of not really tan, but kind of dusky, I guess. Maybe it was just, he's dirty, I guess. He's not really how much he's swimming or whatever. That'd be the only way I guess they wash off. And I try to actually get close enough to where I could even get my dog close enough where he could pet him. But now my dog growls. Now my dog's, he didn't really growl, but he like barks. He's a big old mastiff. I said, why are you acting like that? Don't behave like that, And the wild guy, he backs up a little bit and says something, and he's just not really, he's like, all right, screw that dog kind of thing. And I'm like, well, okay, I guess we see you here. We're going to go up this trail here. So I point where we're going, go left, and then go up that ridge. And we continue on up. Now, at this point, my dog realizes this guy's behind us, and my dog's trying to pull me up the trail. He's choking himself, pulling me up the trail. And I'm like, his name was Shabazz. I said, stop pulling so daggone hard. You just don't need to do this. You're just hurting yourself. I'm not going to run that fast up these rocks. And he's just pulling and pulling. I'm like, you at the end of the hike going to wear yourself out doing this. And, you know, the wild guy you don't like is behind us about 20 feet. Don't worry about it. And he's not throwing rocks anymore. And he's following us up. I keep looking back at him, and I'm just guessing, okay, you know, he's just going to follow us up the trail so far and then go back wherever he goes. I'm not looking to learn anything from him at this point, really. I'm just like, you know, tired myself. Let me get back, but, you know, let me get back to the vehicle and rest my feet because it's already been about 7 miles, 8 miles into this hike. And about, halfway up that ridge. It's not a big high mountain. There's no real good views up there or anything like that. It's not a real scenic trail, but it's a rough, you know, kind of decent circuit hike. I hear a scream off in the woods like nothing I've ever heard before. I mean, it was a roar. It's middle of the day, probably 4 or 5 p.m. The sun's high, or maybe it's receding because it's getting late into the season, but it's still very bright. And that scream was terrifying. You know, I was like, what in the fuck was that? And I looked down at him, and he makes some comment in his language, which I don't understand a word of, but he seems to be somewhat like no big deal. And I'm like, what the, that was, I've never heard anything like that before. A bear can't sound like that. A lion can't sound like that. You know, I don't think a grizzly could sound like that if he took opera lessons. So I was like, whatever that is, I don't want anything to do with it. And I'm starting going, okay, yeah, this just get back to the vehicle, you know, because this one obviously has somebody else with him who's, you know, I don't want to meet. I'm not scared of this 6 foot tall one, but now the stories of how big they get and everything is starting to make sense to me. Like I'm going, I bet that's, you know, a parent of this one, and I don't want to, you know, have anything to do with them really. And so I'm, you know, like, okay, let's get moving. And then I heard the scream again, and it was from down right where that trailhead was, basically, probably no more than a quarter of a mile from where we were. And I looked down at him, and I was like, man, whatever that is, you go deal with that. Like, just I waved at him, like, go away. Just go. Get the hell on out of here. I'm not trying to have you follow me up the mountain. You get that, whoever that is that's looking for you, you go with them. Because that's, you know, what it's sounding like. If somebody wants, his parents or whoever wants him to go and stop messing with them people, I guess. And so, you know, that's, he turned around and went toward wherever that scream was coming from. But Miguel, I never heard a scream like that. I mean, later on, I would hear the air raid siren scream, you know, but that right there was pretty, I mean, it was like a 500-pound lion or something screamed out in the woods, just as loud as it could. And that was probably, that's when the first I said, okay, you know, you need to be careful. This isn't just like, you know, something you kind of write off as, oh, there's wild people in the woods, it's no big deal, and, you know, whatever. I mean, just, you know. But yeah, that was all that happened there. He went back to wherever he went, and I went on back over that mountain to the car, and that was that.
That is very interesting. And did you feel threatened at any point when you encountered this creature?
The young one, no, not at all. I didn't feel threatened. I didn't feel bad vibes from him or anything. The one I told you about near where I used to live, that one I didn't get very good vibes from, but at the same time, I felt like he didn't want me to get any closer. You know, this one I think just didn't really like my dog. I mean, it's a big dog, you know, and the same dog in both cases. So now this dog had met two wild people kind of, you know, and wasn't really interested in meeting them at all. He didn't like them. He didn't like them. But he was actually well behaved. He wasn't frothing at the mouth, acting like Cujo or something like that. You know, he more or less listened to me, but then he barked pretty loud in that mastiff. You know, if you ever heard them when they kind of get that warning bark, you know, it's pretty formidable.
Yeah.
I mean,
so
you know,
when
they're big dogs. So, but I never felt threatened, and I never thought my dog was going to attack him, and I never thought he was going to really do anything to the dog either. I thought it was just, okay, no, I'm not petting your dog. Forget it.
Yeah. So when the dog let out a bark, do you think that's what caused the creature to scream?
No, he didn't scream then. That wasn't what. No, no, no. The one that followed me didn't scream.
Mm-hmm.
The one that followed me talked, but he didn't. I mean, whatever they say, and it's a fascinating language. I mean, it's
But you thought it was another one deeper off in the woods, a
yes,
bigger
yes.
one.
When we were going up the trail and had gotten about a quarter of a mile up the ridge from that trailhead, I know my stories. There's a lot in all of this. I've told 3 stories so far. There's a lot of material here, and I'm trying not to jump back and forth or make too many references to things at other times. But that was another one that was screaming. And at first, when I heard the scream, I didn't know what it was. I mean, I just heard this scream in the woods, and it's in a area that is kind of next to where they call Hazel Country, and it's it's a remote-ish area of the park. But that's not unnerving to me. What was unnerving was just I couldn't imagine what was so big and powerful voice that could make that kind of roar. I mean, it almost sounded like it was impossible for an animal or creature to do that. That's how strong it was. So when I heard it the second time, I just looked down at the one that was following us, and I was like, just waved like, go, get out of here. Like, obviously, this is someone who doesn't want you with us and wants you gone. It's probably his parent, and that's probably what it was. It was probably his father. Or, I mean, it could have been his mother. I don't know, but it was, it was very. The voice of that or the scream of that thing was incredibly powerful. I've never heard anything in the woods that loud, and that's when I started believing the people that said, "Oh, wait till you see a big one." I'd heard that before from people when I said, "Oh, they're not that big. They're not like Bigfoot. They're not like Sasquatch. They just like their smaller cousins or something like that." And people would say, "Yeah, you've seen wait till you see a big one." And I didn't see this one, but I heard it, and I believed everything they said at that point. I was like, "Oh my God, whatever did that's a monster, a big one." Not gonna be a monster like something bad, but like you call somebody in the gym who's just a beast, a monster.
Yeah, that makes sense. William, we got time for another encounter if you got another one.
Well, okay. Yeah, because the one that followed me, I'm pretty sure is the one that visited a shelter I spent the night in on the AT up on Mary's Rock at another date. I think that would have been in March of, I want to say, 99, because I reference everything. I had a big knee surgery in 98 in the summer, and so it was after my knee surgery, so I think it was March of 99, and I had gone up hiking up Mary's Rock. There was no snow at the bottom, but there was snow up on the drive, and the Skyline Drive, I believe, at that point was closed. So I drove up to a place called Panorama. It used to be a restaurant there. It was on Thornton Gap where 211 crosses. And anybody from that area or goes through there, or hell, people who from the D.C. area that go out to the park know that a lot of them will come down to Warrenton, and they'll get on 211, and that's how they'll access the park. And so I went up to the top of Mary's Rock. It's around, I would say, 3,700 feet or so. And there's some pretty rocks up there. And it's about 1.5 miles up from Panorama. So it's not a long hike. And it's a nice hike. It's a nice, afternoon hike or whatever. There was snow up there, probably about 8 to 10 inches at the top. At Panorama, there was just maybe 4 or 5. And at the bottom of the mountain, there was no snow. Like down in Sperryville, there was no snow. Patches of snow anyway. And I hadn't planned on staying up there for the night because it was kind of chilly. It was, there was snow on the ground. The night probably went down in the 20s. But I went up to the top and stayed there for a while, and it was getting dark. I guess I was later in the day than I thought I would be. Everything took a while. At the time, I was actually living in Fairfax because I was going to school there. So I was, my home was still Shenandoah County, but I was living in Fairfax County to go to school. And I said, well, you know what? I've got enough stuff with me. I'll just spend the night up here in that shelter on the Appalachian Trail, because the Appalachian Trail doesn't actually go to the peak, but it's really close to it. So you just go down the little peak trail and get on the AT and make a right, or actually kind of go straight, and you get to one of these, they call them bird's nest shelters. is actually named after Robert Byrd, who was a West Virginia senator, but he got money appropriated for a lot of stuff, so they named stuff after him. And the Bird's Nest Shelter. And it faces west, so there's stone walls on the south and north and east side of it. And my idea was, well, I've got enough clothes on and I got this heavy-duty Indian blanket with me. I'm going to just lay down here on the picnic table because it was already about dark. Instead of walking down, there's like another trail that I didn't take up, but I was going to take down, and it goes from that shelter right down to Skyline Drive. There's also an access road there, and I think that's how they don't really maintain the shelter because it's made out of stone, and they built it a long time ago. It might have been, I don't know, it was a bird's nest, so it wasn't a CCC thing, but and that's a lot of stuff in the Appalachians was a lot of trails and shelters and stuff had been built. I say CCC is Civilian Conservation Corps. And it's, you run across that stuff if you're in the Appalachians a lot, especially like Virginia, West Virginia. And so anyway, I said, well, I'll just stay on here and listen to my Discman. And that kind of tells you it was 90s. We had Discman there. We were past Walkman, but had Discman. And I did 2 albums by Danzig, How the Gods Kill. Very appropriate, right? And I said, well, it's about a 45-minute album. I just keep time listening to the album over and over. So I lay down on the picnic table, and I got the blanket on me. I got shorts on, heavy-duty denim shorts. It's cold outside, but I got like 4 pairs of shorts on. And the reason I did that is I had one of these knee braces, one of them fitted, like molded Don Joy knee braces on my left knee. And that's why I knew it was after my knee surgery. And boots and heavy socks and everything, and decent enough jacket. So I know I'm not going to have like hypothermia or something. I'm going to be fine. And I'll just sit out here. It'll be kind of a mystical night or whatever. I'll lay out here on the picnic table, and as soon as the light breaks, I'll go down. Now, the shelter faces west, so you're not going to see the light break on the eastern horizon. It's going to be more like it stops being so dark. It's darkest before the dawn. So you just wait till that faint change in light happens. And I thought, right about that point, I'll go out and look for Venus, the morning star, interestingly also called Lucifer, which is the light bringer, or associated with in some mythology, I think Roman or whatever. So I said, okay, I'm going to wait for the star to come up. And when I see that, I know the sun's right behind it. I'll start walking down the trail. And it's snow up here, even though it wasn't a moonlit night. If the moon was up at all, it was very much a sliver. I can't tell you if it was waxing or waning, but there wasn't much moonlight. Because if there had been more moonlight, I probably would have just walked on down. Because with the moon and the snow, you could see just about everything but colors, So I was like, all right, I'm going to spend the night up here. So I don't really fall asleep, but after so many times listening to the same album, you kind of in and out of sleep. And something keep pulling at my blanket. I think it's just my boots. Because if you sleep with boots on and you're outside, your boots are going to pull at your blanket or whatever, just from your legs moving, feet moving. But sometimes I'm pulling my blanket up, it's down by my waist. And I'm like, I know I'm not pulling this blanket all the way down to my freaking waist. So I pull it back up and hold on to it. And I'm just, in and out of sleep, but kind of awake enough to not be sound asleep, but not so awake that I notice what's going on with this blanket. I just know that every so often I wake up and notice it is halfway down my jacket or it's down to my waist. And I'm like, I'm not kicking that much on a picnic table that I'm laying on my back on. I'd have kicked myself off the table. And, well, at some point, the table comes up. The end of the table with my feet, it gets picked up, and I wake up real, like, what the, and look up, and the end of the table didn't come up more than about, 5 or 6 inches, but it was enough to get my attention. And I look up, and here's this big old, this one's big, like 6'8", 10, I don't know. But laying on my back on the picnic table, I wasn't even anywhere close to his waist. And he's looking down at me, and I'm just like, I think the first thing I said was, oh my God, is this Lucifer? And because I was waiting for the morning star to come up. And I'm just like, what the f- is happening here? I look and go, geez, there's a freaking wild person at the end of my freaking table, and he's fucking huge. And now he doesn't look mean. I can't make his face out too well. I don't have much light, just a little bit of what's reflecting off the snow and the kind of ambient starlight. So I don't get a very good look at him. If I have a flashlight or something, it's in my bag, which is in the corner of the shelter. So I'm not going to pull that out. And I just think, okay, just lay on your back, be cool, don't get up. You know, this guy's big. I mean, he's huge, and he hasn't hurt you. And if he wanted to, God knows he could. I mean, you're in about the most vulnerable position you could be in. So just lay there. Don't get up. And that's what I did. I just laid there and didn't get up. And he put the table down. He wasn't trying to dump me off the table. And I, of course, clutched my Discman because my biggest fear was the Discman falling and breaking and the CD scratching, of course, even in the midst of all this. So I just laid there, and he came around behind me. He was absolutely fascinated by the headphones. Pulled them off my head. He didn't put them on his head, but he kind of looked at them, and you know, I could get my eyes had adjusted enough by this point. I could see these kinds of things. It wasn't pitch dark, and you know, like I couldn't see at all. I could see enough. I couldn't make out real good details. I could tell you that his face was very broad, his mouth was wide, his nose was wide, but it was light skin color. He did not look mean. He didn't give me any kind of mean or threatening vibes whatsoever. I didn't feel in danger, but at the same time, I felt like it's best just lay your ass on that picnic table and stay there. Don't get up. You know, don't like get up and say, hey, how you doing? My name's William. Nice to meet you and all. Just no. Just lay there like you're doing and be cool, you know. And he put the headphones back on me wrong. He put them like kind of on my face or temple, but he actually put them back on both with the covers on both sides, and these weren't earbuds. These were like actual, you know, they cover your ears, you know, like real headphones. They weren't real big, heavy duty, like recording quality, but they were, you know, they were decent. And they were enough to where if I had my hat on and I had them over my ears and then I had my hood on over that, my ears weren't cold. My face wasn't really, you know, too exposed or cold or anything. And I guess it was probably mid 26, 27 degrees. I don't know. It wasn't frigid. There was a light breeze. It wasn't hella windy. And I laid there until I realized I had to get up. I noticed that daybreak kind of thing. And I thought, well, I don't know where the wild guy's gone. I guess he's gone. You know, I must have, you know, really fell asleep then. And I get down off the picnic table to go get my bag and put stuff in it and leave. And I hear this commotion right under me. And I'm like, oh, Jesus. And he was like, must have been halfway underneath the table or right next to the table or something lying down. And luckily I got off on the other side. I didn't step on him. And he scooted over into the corner of the shelter, which would be the southeast corner of it, and started growling. And it was like a low kind of warning growl, but he was, you know, I couldn't really make him out. Now it's in too dark of a place for me to really see him, you know, and I know he's there, but there's no reflection off the snow that's hitting him or anything like that. He's not very visible, but I know he's there and he's growling. And it's like a real deep kind of audible. It wasn't like infrasound or something, but it was an audible growl. But it was like, oh, Jesus, I got to get my bag and get out of here. So I just talked to him calmly. I said, I got to get my bag there. And I point to myself, and then I point out the shelter like, I got to go. I'm going to just get this and go. And, you know, I don't know if you stay in here very often, but I'm going to leave. I'm going to leave you alone. And I went and grabbed the bag. He's still kind of growling, but not very threatening, but kind of warning. And I'm being very cautious to move slowly. Don't do anything quick. Don't, you know, maybe if I make any quick moves, it would probably be a bad idea. So I'm doing everything real slow, and I put things in the bag, put the Discman in. I actually looked at the Discman, and as much as he was interested in it, I considered leaving it there for a minute. And I looked at it and I said, I could leave this here. And I just got this sense in my head, no, you know, this is your stuff. You take your stuff. And I said, okay, there's you're not going to get batteries anyway. What are you going to do? You probably end up scratching the CD and not knowing how to play it. So I'm not going to leave the disc man. But for a minute there, I thought, as fascinated as he was by this, wonder if I should just leave this for him and see what he makes out of it. But I didn't. So I put everything in the bag, put it on, and walked out. And now it's bright enough where I can see all these, huge footprints all over the place, all around the shelter. All his, and I could see where they had come up through the woods from kind of like the northeast, really, cut right through the woods and came right toward the shelter. I have no idea if he thought somebody was going to be there or not. I have no idea how he would. And I didn't make a fire. I didn't have food. I didn't have anything like that. I mean, I had like some water, and I don't even know if I had much in the way of snacks or anything. If I did, I didn't eat them. And so I'm just looking at all these prints all around it, trying to see if I see any more, if I see him going any other direction. And I just, like, well, okay, he stopped growling and he realizes I'm not a threat to him. And so I walked on down that trail. I can't remember the name of it, but it goes directly from that AT shelter right to the Skyline Drive. And then I walked down the Skyline Drive, and you go through a tunnel there. And that was kind of freaky because I got the sense he was following me. Like, how could he not follow me? He's not going to just stay, sleeping in the corner now that I've left. So I'm thinking, yeah, he's probably following me back there, but I don't see him. And I honestly don't turn around too many times. I turn around a few times. But then I get to the tunnel, and it's not a long tunnel. Like I said, I didn't have a flashlight on me. If I had one, I wasn't using it. I don't even remember. I don't think I had one, honestly. And certainly we didn't have, phones with lights and all that kind of thing. So I thought, well, I wonder if he's going to follow me through this tunnel. Because he either got one choice or the other. He can follow me through the tunnel, and he can go over the mountain above the tunnel. And so I walked through the tunnel, and it's pitch black in there once you get about halfway in. And I do notice, you got that little kind of light at the end of the tunnel thing. And at some point, something blocked it. And I said, yeah, he came down and he didn't want to go through the tunnel, but he stood right there in the doorway. So when I came out the other side, that's really pretty close to Panorama. At that point, you're like a quarter of a mile or less from Panorama, which was where I parked. And then I went down to my car and went on back. And I think I told one of my roommates, he's like, where the hell did you go, man? You just left. And next thing, you don't come back all night. We were worried about you. And I said, yeah, I spent the night up on Mary's Rock. And they were like, geez, bro, I mean, you could have told somebody you were going to do that. And I was like, well, I didn't know I was going to. I just kind of got up there. It got dark. And I thought, well, hey, I got enough stuff to stay the night. Why not? Listen to Danzig all night. And, the wild person came to the shelter while I was up there. And my roommates were just like, whatever crazy shit you talking about, that's just insane. They believed it, but they were also just like, what the hell's wrong with you, man? And I was like, well, I mean, it wasn't bad, but I didn't really tell them too much in detail of it, but that was,
Yeah, so at this point, you think there's wild people everywhere in the woods or here and there, but have you considered being marked at this point, that they're specifically seeking you out?
No, I thought I was just kind of lucky and naive, if you will. Lucky, to me anyway, because I've never had a bad encounter at this point, and I never did. But I didn't think they were everywhere. I mean, I knew better than that. I knew they were rare and elusive, and, as a child, that one guy wanted to hunt them, said they're the most elusive, rarest animal in the woods, and most people don't even think they exist. But then, like you said, all the black people of Rappahannock knew about them. And a lot of them also very American Indian. Like some of them look more American Indian than they do black. And they all knew about them, at least the ones that were from there, And so he told me they were elusive. And I knew people said they only come around every 10 or 15 years. What I was thinking is just, well, Shenandoah National Park's a national park. You're not allowed to hunt in the park. I think it's federal law about carrying firearms. You probably know this as well as anybody, Miguel. If you carry a firearm in a national park, I don't know what the law is on that, but they're safe in a national park. They don't have to worry about anybody shooting them. Because, even if you shoot an animal in a national park in self-defense, you better have a really good defense is what I've been told. I've been told if a bear comes after you in the Shenandoah Park, any national park, and you shoot the bear in the national park with anything other than bear mace, it's not going to be easy to get out of that. I'm not saying you can't. I'm not suggesting anyone do it. I don't know. But, they're safe in the park. They don't have to worry about it. So my thinking is just they know that. The deer know Shenandoah National Park is no hunting. I mean, go drive down Skyline Drive during hunting season, and you'll have 8 and 10-point bucks just stare at you. Like, yeah, what are you going to do? Just like in the state parks, they do the same things. And if the deer can, of course, these hominids can understand that. So I just thought, well, maybe there's a family of them. Maybe there's more than people think here. And there's huge areas between the trails that nobody goes. People stay on the trails. I stayed on the trails in the park. I never really went off trail in the national park. I did in the national forest, but it's rocky, it's rough. If you twist an ankle or fall and you by yourself, you're in bad shape. And I never heard of anybody being hurt by them. And, people every so often get lost in the park or get on the wrong trail and have to spend the night in the woods, not deliberately like I did in a shelter, but, that's happened more than a few times. And they get found the next day or the day after that. I've never heard of, I don't know if there's any like missing 411 in Shenandoah Park. Maybe Smoky Mountains, but, my thought of it is this is just a good place for them. And they're around here and there. And, I don't know why I've run into them, but I have. And I don't know anything about being marked or being, at this point, I'm thinking I've seen, one as a child and then another one in two more encounters that I think now are the same one. But at the time, I wasn't sure that was the same one that had followed me and my dog. So I don't. If you marked by one, it would be one individual maybe like you. I like this guy. I want to. Maybe they're fascinated by people or something. And you hear this, the young ones are fascinated by people. The old ones don't want anything to do with people. And that makes sense. You got to I took classes in anthropology, and I never became an anthropologist or anything. I'm no expert in any of these things. But there's certain behaviors that are typical of primates. And then you can go a step beyond that and say hominids, even though officially we're the only hominid, on Earth. These aren't recognized. But there's some things that's just animal behavior and some things that's clearly primate behavior. And you can kind of extrapolate there would be some things that would be hominid behavior. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So
kind of from an anthropological point of view or whatever, or perspective, that's kind of how I looked at that.
Yeah, same here. And we're about an hour and a half in. Do you want to wrap it up there and do a part 2 later?
Yeah, I do, because I want to also, my buddy's up here and I got to start the grill.
Okay. Well, William, I really appreciate you for taking the time to contact me and share your stories. I found them to be very intriguing and informative, and it was exciting listening to it. So I really appreciate it.
Well, I can't wait to tell you where this one goes, and that one is going to be a 2-part. Well, it's not 2-part necessarily for you, but that was for 2 different occasions, and that's where I met this one again in another place, and it gets a little stranger.
All right, William, thank you so much for sharing some of your encounters with all of us, and I think a lot of the listeners thoroughly enjoyed it as much as I did. I think it is possible the Sasquatch can tag certain people and follow them around, and you see the same phenomenon with paranormal activity and UFO activity, and by that, I mean it seems to follow certain individuals. It's hard to say if there's a connection, but there possibly could be. I have noticed that there seems to be conflict when the Sasquatch and dogs come in close proximity to one another. I think when the Sasquatch are in the area, they are usually watching us and we don't notice it, but the dogs pick up on it. William is a pretty brave individual to have the want to walk up to one of these creatures, and I think he truly wanted to know what they were. I would certainly keep a close eye on your dogs for sure when you're out in the woods, because you never know if that's what they're trying to get at or if they're just being peaceful and you happen to run into them. But yeah, William, I really appreciate you for coming on the show, and I really hope that we get to do part 2, and I know the listeners are hoping for that as well. If you guys want a part 2, be sure to hit the like and subscribe button and let us know down in the comments below. But yeah, I appreciate all the viewers, the listeners, and until the next one, you guys be safe and take care, everyone.